Hello, everyone. Welcome to Liam's Lifetime. I'm your host, Liam, aka Himbar, doing my weekly update. This is Liam's Leapings number 35, my update for the 15th of April, 2023. Don't you just love like the random stuff you get in the background on my channel? Sometimes we put the bigger toys in here. Sometimes there's a trampoline right there, and there's a yoga ball, and a rocking horse, and a slide. There's a stroller over by the bookshelf. But anyways, and there was balloons in my video that came out Wednesday. I filmed that on my birthday. I was on Easter, but um, so yeah, this last week was good. It was my birthday, so it was pretty good. Um, did I get any books? I don't think I did. I don't think I did. Anyways, so yeah, so I did have a productive reading week actually. So I want to tell you about the ones I finished first, even though I put them on the bottom. So I'm not very smart. The first thing I finished, I think, was "Can Animals and Machines Be Persons" by Justin Lieber. This is a thought experiment, a dialogue, as it says here. It's a philosophical thought experiment, though. It's a functionalist one, or is it? It's kind of putting the question to functionalism, which is really the only philosophical theory that it would allow things like machines to, basically be like humans in a way. So it's pretty interesting. It's pretty short. It is written in like a story format, like a legal proceeding about a chimp and a computer on this space station, and they're not, for whatever reason, because it doesn't matter, I guess, but for whatever reason, they're not able to get this chimp in this computer off the space station, but they want to decommission it, and that means, you know, probably not blowing it up, but making it disintegrate in the atmosphere. And they're deciding whether that's moral or not, whether this chimp and this AI are persons. It doesn't come to a conclusion. That's up to you. Hell, who knows if you come up with a conclusion? Just something to think about, right? More relevant today. So that's why I wanted to read it. It's also Justin Lieber. I read one book by him that's like a fantasy novel. He is the son of Fritz Leiber, who's one of my favorite authors. So, um, and then I finished Breakaway by Joel Shepard. This is the second Cassandra Kreznov novel. I finished my novella last week, and I was like, let me go and read some Cassandra Kreznov, because Cassandra Kreznov was one of the influences on my novella, and this was enjoyable. It gets a lot more political than the first book. I don't know, it's interesting because like I feel like there's a lot of Joel Shepard, just to put it bluntly, he can write a very badass scene. Like if you read Renegade, the intro to Renegade is one of the most exciting like things I've read in a long time. I didn't even love the book, but like it's just so intense. Um, but he also spends a lot of time kind of making it boring, though. I think he's better in Spiral Wars, which is his later series, compared to these Cassandra Kreznov books. So he's just improved as a writer. Um, but it's kind of sucks when you read Combat and you're yawning. But that's just me in a nutshell. I don't. I either am bored by Combat and yawn, or I think it's really awesome, which I think reflects differently or interestingly on my own Combat when I write in my writing. So it's not a book I finished, but I'll just mention it. I did get this Kill Switch, the third book in Cassandra Kreznov, and I have started it as well. I'm like 90 pages in or something, 83, so that's not super far. Kill Switch. I did do reading in this though. Like I said, mentioning it early because I just mentioned Breakaway. Then I finished Tim Powers, The Stress of Her Regard, finally. My poem on Poetry Thursday that came out on Thursday is the poem that title comes from, which is The Sphinx and Medusa by Clark Ashton Smith, which is one of the big reasons I wanted to read this anyways. That is the epigram. It has that poem, or a chunk of the poem, even the poem's not that long anyways, but and there's a bunch of epigraphs, with other poems by like Shelley and Byron and Swinburne, stuff like that. So lots of good stuff, honestly. This is very fun. It's a little long. I think it could have been shorter, but it's very gothic. It is about Percy Shelley, rather, Polidori, who wrote The Vampire. Mary Shelley a little bit, I guess, and about Lord Byron and John Keats, and it's awesome. And about vampires. It's really cool. I liked it a lot. I just said it's a little too long, maybe, but I'm looking forward to more Tim Powers. There's another book coming out later this year. Who I believe the main character is like Charlotte Bronte. I think his main character might be one of the other Brontes. But but that sounds cool too. So Distress of Her Regard, finally finished that. Tim Powers is one of those authors I've wanted to get to this year, along with things like Labi Tidar, who I already read, and like Umberto Eco, I believe I've already read as well. So I did finish one short story. It was actually probably more of a novelette, it's probably a novella, let's be honest. It is The People of the Black Circle by Robert E. Howard. Not my favorite Howard. It has some really cool moments. I just am of the opinion that still Sword and Sorcery works best in most cases in short stories. And I mean short stories, not novelettes and not novellas or novels. There's obvious exceptions, you know what I mean? But my favorite Fafhrd and Grey Monster stuff are short stories. And then some of the novellas are also really good, right? And there are some really good Sword and Sorcery novels, though they're always on the shorter side. So like Sometime Lofty Towers is great. But even Robert E. Howard, I think he does better when he is less prolix, which I think is a problem a little bit with Howard. I love Howard, guys. So don't get me wrong. But he's definitely one of those guys that wrote for a living, and so I feel like sometimes he's a little wordy because it would make him more money, and that's what it is. I feel like Clark Ashton Smith is the same thing, and I love Clark Ashton Smith as well. So that's just me. But I did enjoy it. There's only like 3 stories in this one, and the next one's the only Conan novel, The Hour of the Dragon, which I might do a separate review for. I don't generally review collections, anthologies, magazines. I've made a few exceptions for a couple magazines, but and I'll probably make more in the future. I just generally don't, and that's largely because I'm not taking notes throughout them. I generally read short stories, and I like the fact that I'm not stopping to take notes because I don't plan on making reviews for them, which is why my magazine reviews are like all over the place because I didn't take notes while I was reading through it. It's kind of an afterthought to make the review. Okay, so I finished 3 books. Okay, the 4th one I finished, I actually don't have a copy of. I don't even have an antique copy. I would like one. And that is The Wood Beyond the World by William Morris. This is his 4th prose romance. It has less poetry than this one, which is a shame, I think, actually. It's not as long as Roots of the Mountains, so it's still better than Roots of the Mountains because of that, but it's probably like in the number 3 spot. Okay, so I've read 4 of his prose romances. These are very heavily influential on Tolkien, by the way, and they're very good. I like them a lot. I think once you just figure out the vocabulary, Morris is really easy to read, I think. But the number 1 I'd say so far of all that I read is The House of the Wolfings. It's the first prose romance. Then The Story of the Glittering Plain, which is I think one of the first secondary world novels ever written. That's the 3rd prose romance. This one, The Wood Beyond the World, is the 4th prose romance, and then Roots of the Mountains, which has the coolest title probably, but it's the 2nd prose romance. I'd put it at number 4 of the 4 I've read. There are more. I probably will read all of them. I want to. So, and they're all in the public domain, so there's no reason not to. Okay, and then so that's the 4th thing I finished. Besides reading Kill Switch, I read some nonfiction. I'll mention that last. And I read some other stuff. I just didn't read enough of it. Like I did read a little Between Princesses and Other Jobs, and then I realized I had a ton of stuff I needed to read, and that technically doesn't come out for a few months, so I guess I'll put it off for a minute. I am finally on to Exodus from the Long Sun today, as of recording this. So Friday, the 14th, is the anniversary of Gene Wolfe's passing. And I'm going to finally finish The Long Sun here soon. I'm not going to finish it tonight. I'll probably finish it hopefully this weekend if I can. If not this weekend, definitely next week. It is longer, I think, than all of the other 3 volumes. Where am I? I'm like halfway through. I don't have my marker in here right now. Yeah, I'm right here. So I'm a little bit more than halfway through. But I'm enjoying this one so far. It's better than Calday of The Long Sun. More stuff is happening. I'm interested to see how it wraps up. It's definitely not as straightforwardly fun or interesting as Book of the New Sun. I feel like there's a lot here I'm missing. When you read Book of the New Sun, there's a lot of stuff you're missing. I feel like this is more subtle. If that's possible. I feel like it's more subtle. It's more straightforward, but also more subtle, I feel like. But I am liking it a lot. Of course, it's Gene Wolfe. He's my guy. And then as far as nonfiction reading goes, I read a decent amount of nonfiction, but the 2 ones I really was in this week, if I could get not glare, Copy Editing Fiction by Amy Schneider. Just thought it'd be fun to read. I've never read a copy editing or editing book. I feel like an amateur as far as editing goes, but I'm trying to get there to make myself a more qualified editor. So yeah, copy editing fiction, it's pretty good so far. It's funny because like the reason I haven't read a copy editing book before is because I don't read a lot of stuff for like procedural knowledge. I read it for, I don't know, information and other types of knowledge. And like a history book, right? This is the other thing I read. Written After Rome by Robin Fleming. This is recommended to me by Archaeodeath, Professor Howard Williams of Chester University. I assume he's still there. A few years ago, he recommended it to me. So I finally got to it. I'm really enjoying it, right? And so there's a lot more stuff there's a lot more information in here. And it's in some ways, it's like, it's not as important because it's like, do I really need to know like that these certain like Romano Britons had like big jaws? Like, doesn't matter. Like, probably not, right? I mean, for most things, copy editing fiction, though, like that is something important for a job. It's procedural knowledge, like I said. So a lot of procedural knowledge is boring. And that's not boring, I don't think. But it's just weird reading that when I mostly read like philology or anthropology texts, which are a lot more involved. There's a lot more to it. I feel like even when I read like, no offense to like art historian stuff, but I read some art historian like essays because my brother's in art history, and I thought it was like so straightforward. I was like, this is it. Like, this is an academic text. I mean, like it's funny, and that's just because my first exposure to academic texts were philology texts, and they're not straightforward. So like, I mean, it'd probably be like if most of us went and read like some physics like journal, and we'd just be like, yeah, I don't understand what's going on at all, type of thing. It's very technical. So it's cool when like history is just a lot of stuff to absorb. It's not very technical a lot of times. This does have a lot of archaeology in it. I think she's probably an archaeologist. Yeah, she's an archaeologist, I think. So, but so it's just interesting to read something that's like just technical, kind of, and like so barely technical. This is like, I feel like a child could do that stuff. No offense. So anyways, that's what I've done this week. I have written a little bit, not as much as I would like. I'm working on some flash pieces right now, and I'd like to there's a decent amount of stuff I would like to have done by the end of April, but I've made very little progress on. So we'll see what's going on with that. If I can finish up some stuff, I'd like to hear back. I know there's a few things I had submitted earlier this year that closed at the end of March, and so maybe I'll hear back from some of those places this month or either in May. And then there's other places opening up in May for stories, and there's places closing at the end of this month for stories, and so there's just a lot of stuff going on. But I have gotten some feedback on my novella, which is really cool. So thank you for that. For those participating, I really, really appreciate it. And now I'm still looking forward to more feedback. I'm still working on the editing thing for that and art for that, actually. So, but we'll see. That those can go a little slower since I kind of want the beta readers with it first. But it has pretty good initial feedback, I think. So I'm excited if everyone can maybe eventually have their hands on that or something, or if they wanted. Yeah. Anyways, it's been. Oh, I did send in one story actually this week. Send in my Koval story to Himline. So anyway, I think that was it. It's the only story I think I sent somewhere. Anyhow, it's Williams Lyceum. What have you been up to this week? What have you been reading? What's going on for the rest of April, I guess? School starts back up Monday for me, so yay. Woo. All the time. Never ends.